to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listener. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Chris Prunty and Daniel Quinn. Gentlemen, good to have you on today. In today's episode, we are finishing the Dawn of a Thousand Mechs, our mecha setting. Even though we don't call them mechs in this setting, we're, like I said last episode, we're creatively bankrupt. So we're just going to go with the easy title. In this episode, we are going over our plot hooks for our setting, where we introduce an interesting scenario or interesting twist on the setting that we'd like to see and the type of story that goes with it. So, gentlemen, who wants to start?
I was going to take a page out of Daniel's book and really destroy the fact that playing by the rules, I was going to have my space Luddites. So I wanted a group of them and for the story to take place around them where they're effectively being kamikaze-like pilots, where they're doing these horrible missions in the hopes that they die before they lose their humanity. Their mission is kind of like a Suicide Squad-like thing, where you would put them into the most dangerous possible situations with no intent to get back, but if they do, then they just go on another mission. So you could put this into situations where they're up against many more mechs than they should be, but the fact that they don't care about how far they push their mech and how far they push themselves is what sells it. So a lot of the ideas that I came up from it were kind of like the desperate last stand or diversionary tactic, where they would hit a base that they have no hope of destroying, but it would cause forces to be focused there while their main force attacks somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. That would be so they would be very frightening figures, I think, from the perspective of other writers or relic, pilots, because once they realize, oh man, this is one of those plowshares types, we're in real trouble, because they might just run into our base and overload their core and just blow us all up.
Yeah, I mean, these things are basically giant walking nuclear reactors, so that thought alone is pretty terrifying. Except it's obviously not, nuclear, but,
right.
World-destroying power in the hands of zealots is pretty terrifying.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, for sure.
I also like the idea that what happens if they're just mission after mission successful and they're like, I've been in this thing for a while. I don't really like where this is going, but I gotta keep doing it for my people.
They might have a realization, because if you think about it, the more they're in the relic, whether or not they don't believe in its power, it's going to influence them. So maybe what happens is, within that sub-faction you made, another faction forms of those who have now turned against the original cult,
I do like that idea, actually, because now you have character hooks where you're a renegade, you are a relic pilot, but you're actually renegade from the straight edge Luddites, where, the further you did this, the further you realize that these people are very much in the wrong, or maybe maybe sitting in the pilot seat kind of makes them realize just how wrong they are, or maybe there are some kind of whispers from the relic itself. We kind of established that these things are basically god hearts. Maybe the gods are speaking to them and they're kind of whispering hey, this is not what you've been told. And so because we don't really know the religion of these straight edge Luddites, right? So maybe there's some kind of hypocrisy going on, because that's always fun to play around with, right?
I mean, there's also the hint that they're reforming the what do we call it, the apotheosis. So maybe there are whispers from their sun god too, so it's a struggle between the gods that they've now hijacked and their own that they're creating unwittingly.
I do like the idea of them being the first cultists of the apotheosis.
Yeah.
That kind of fun little time cycle, essentially. It actually makes sense, because from that you could see the cycle starting over again, time and time again, and that was a theme when we started with the old Land of a Thousand Gods. So that's really fun.
Crisis of faith is always a good story too. Or what happens when someone who's dedicated their life and had planned to die for it loses faith.
Oh yeah, I mean, does stripping away your humanity mean the inability to have faith. You know, what does that mean? Is that part of humanity, or is that something that the synths have as well? You know, like that's kind of an interesting philosophical take, and that's actually a really, now that I think about it, that's a pretty cool point to kind of bring up in general.
I also like that you can focus on a handful of individual characters, so you can focus on just like the small radical wing they send out to do these missions that are like the no return sort of missions, and then you can just follow their development, if this was a story or even like if it were a game, as they start to make realizations, whether some of them maybe become more entrenched in their beliefs, and then some of them realize that they don't have grounding and they go kind of against each other within their own group, and that becomes the conflict.
Or maybe we can even have a religious civil war or a schism, as it
Yeah.
were.
I think one that I was thinking about is similar to Chris's in that it focuses on individuals rather than, larger scale, conflicts between factions. Um, in this sort of setting, you have a really good chance to work with like military sci-fi, which is a huge genre unto itself. And usually the writers of it have some kind of military background or understanding of war and tactics, which obviously we don't, but I'm thinking for myself at least. But I think one of the key things that in military sci-fi they're trying to get across is disillusionment with war, and that the things that we glorify, especially in fantasy about war, are things not to be glorified. So particularly, I'm thinking of the classic, like the Forever War, which inspired by the Vietnam War, takes some really crazy turns in that story in terms of where he goes with it. But at the end of the day, it's about one soldier and what happens when they kind of get used as a tool. So I was thinking, we had this nationalist right wing sort of group that's seizing power within Earth's inner sphere, and they're kind of using other people. They're using the Luddites, and they're using the factions we established that are out kind of on the fringe, as proxy as for their proxy wars. So maybe you could tell a story where you have one soldier who's a nobody starting in the inner spheres, kind of as part of as a foot soldier there, and he gets, and I know that we established like that the relics, they're like outlawed, so they're not meant to be used, but maybe he gets shuffled around from one front to the other until finally he or she is pushed all the way out to the fringe, and then he gets caught up with like having to be on a Black Ops mission where he adopts a relic when they're technically not supposed to, and he starts getting caught up, in all of the political maneuvering there, realizing at the end that he's just like a guy who doesn't really have a destiny as far as his faction is concerned. And then now he has to make a choice, like, do I side with these people out here? Do I side with the government that sent me out here, or do I do my own thing? Because at the end of the day, like, he has to have his own life, and everyone is arrayed against him.
That's an insanely deep personal journey, and I'm totally with it.
I mean, originally I was thinking of having it be someone within the Luddite faction, but I like that Chris had that one, because that's what I was thinking. Like, I would love to follow like the Crisis of Faith, but I think what Chris laid out makes more sense. It makes more sense in that they were part of like this kind of almost kamikaze cult, whereas the Inner Sphere one, they've got rules to follow, and they come from a particular kind of structured military background that has duty and honor bound to it, which he has to question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that when you're talking about, a disillusionment with ideology, I think, especially when it comes to far right ideology, I think for me anyway, there's a real fascination with what happens when the people who are spouting, kind of the lingo and the talk, when they actually see their ideology come into practice, right? Like, especially when it comes to neo-Nazis and like race realists, quote unquote, when you talk about people who are, like, oh, well, we just want our own separate nation, and they don't actually anticipate the violence that would actually require, what it means when they see that violence actually take place. I think seeing that, and especially when it comes to like a crisis of faith type thing, I think that journey would be really fascinating to read about or see from a character development standpoint.
Well, I was trying to take it in. Like, that is a really alienated concept. Like, to see something that you believe in get corrupted, or to see the truth of it rather than the fantasy. Like, I've always loved the details of like World War I, of where you hear about someone going off to war and they're talking about how noble it is and how good it is for their country, and then they get there and they're splattered in mud, dirt, and blood, and they are just terrified, and the ugliness of war comes to realization on them. I know that's not exactly what you were talking. You were talking more about of a fascist regime coming to control, but I like the disillusionment aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, fascist regime, or just like coming to terms with reality of what your ideology actually looks like, or what your beliefs actually are, is more appropriate thematically. So either way works. It doesn't necessarily even have to be, that far right extremist, just to see, what war actually does, especially in this type of, you know,
The
uh,
ugliness.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really fascinating aspect of it.
Well, I mean, to repeat what you were saying, Rob, is like it doesn't really matter what the ideology is, right? It's like when you see it executed and what it requires to achieve like that ideology outside of the abstract, that's when you suddenly realize, okay, do I actually believe this? Like, am I willing to go the final step to execute this? Or am I just another instrument of someone else's abstraction, right? So this
Right.
guy, he's a tool of this ideology. And every ideology we've set up in the setting, they all have tools. Like we've got the leaders of the Luddites and the leaders of the kind of far right faction we set up inside of the inner sphere. They both believe in something that maybe their followers don't necessarily understand fully. And the same thing is true of the factions out in the fringe, or even the Mondo Corporation for what little we know about them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we're all just like instruments of their will. And so the cool stories arise when those instruments decide we have our own will and now we're doing our own thing.
Especially when that comes into conflict with who you self-identify as, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you identify as someone who is either a patriot or a nationalist, or a leftist, or what have you, and then your ideology is challenged based solely on experience, that like shakes you to your core. And I like the types of themes that we're kind of exploring here, Daniel. So that's a really, I wouldn't say it's fun, but man, that's a really interesting way to kind of approach the
Right.
setting. Yeah. So I'm gonna veer us and just go completely left with it, because we got real heavy with that one. My first plot hook is actually just real simple, and I want to have essentially kaiju battles in space with the relics. I feel like if we're gonna be doing the deep serious stuff, then of course there's going to be somewhere on the fringe where there's going to be relic pilots who are just punching the shit out of giant Cthulhuid monsters,
Yes.
saving the universe, like galaxy by galaxy. And that's totally fine. If there's some equivalent of the Zerg or Tyranid, which are basically, or yeah, which are the progenitor for the Zerg, basically, like that's totally fine. Like maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to have giant robots fight giant space monsters. I, I'm cowboying that shit up. Like, absolutely, let's do it. Like, why not? Like, we don't have to take everything in this setting so goddamn seriously. I would prefer to do it that way. I think that's what's really interesting about mecha settings. But at the same time, I mean, giant robots fighting giant monsters is just fucking cool, man. Like,
You've
come on.
got to have it. I mean, like, why would you make
Yeah,
giant robots if they're not going to fight giant monsters at some point? Like, why? Why bother?
right. Or at the very least, other giant robots, which
Yes,
is also acceptable. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Mine's a real quick and simple one. What else do we want to do to kind of make that concept a little bit more interesting and perhaps setting specific?
I did have, so I had it, one of mine was similar to that, which thankfully I made more than three, so I'm good. But if I were to tack on some stuff to that, I was thinking, and this is a movie that's hotly debated, at least in the Alien franchise, but the Prometheus movie I actually really liked, because it had this almost like Lovecraftian feel to it, an intellectual Lovecraftian feel. So I thought, well, we do have those quantum filaments, right? And you said fighting aliens across the galaxy, like that's those jump missions they go on to explore those unknown fronts. It's possible they might make a jump mission and realize, oh boy, this world's full of horrifying monsters, and that's where you get to have those kind of fun, adventure style, fights with the robots. And it veers into horror almost when you do that.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to kind of work with, is like, okay, we have these massive machines that are incredibly powerful. What can possibly challenge these giant death machine robots? Like maybe we should talk about the kaiju a little bit more and what makes them different and interesting.
Also, we were saying that most of humanity was separated from each other after a incident that kind of made space big again. Uh, Before people discovered the quantum filaments and everything. I like this is a reason why even small areas would have these relics, because it was always a danger of these monsters from outer space.
Yeah, I mean they're like alien wildlife. We don't know what's out in space. It could be all kinds of crazy stuff, even in the short term. Like in the short term, in terms of like distance, maybe
And
there's creatures that are dangerous just in our own inner sphere that we know about, but then outside the galaxy, they're even crazier.
one thing that we can also play with is, since no one really knows like where the relics come from, they're so old that people have forgotten them. They've essentially been repurposed in more modern times to fight each other and fight wars. But maybe you could have
Oh.
some of the weapons that are on there are really good at fighting these space kaiju.
I like that.
I mean, maybe
What?
like the classic thing is that these a lot of the ones in the inner sphere are very regenerative, and so that's why they're far more fearsome.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to kind of touch on is I don't necessarily want these giant monsters to just be dumb animals. Like I want them to have some level of intelligence where they can have decision-making processes, or they have some level of self-awareness at the very least. Because I don't want it to be just, you know, space whaling but in giant robot suits, right? Like I don't want it to be, oh, this is kind of gross because they're big game hunters, like
Uh-huh.
hunting down prey. I want it to be there is a malevolence to these giant space aliens because I think again it's more fun when you're not just punching a zebra in the face with a mech. Like that's what I want to try and avoid anyway.
Well, maybe treat them like another faction in the sense that they have an intent, like maybe they naturally inhabited the space that we're breaking into. I would want to avoid though the concept of setting them up as a hive mind because I feel like that's so overdone. So maybe there's
Yeah,
some
that's
other
very
animal.
played out.
Right.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Like maybe there's some other animal we can model it after. But if you think about it, like as humans, we're just encroaching on land that the natural world already quote unquote owned. So that could be true of space.
Instead of hive mind, uh, and I'm assuming that nothing like a Gestalt consciousness would be good, but
Hmm.
maybe still a collective, in not the sense of like mandatory, but more of maybe they started out as a hive mind and got individualism.
I mean, what are we afraid of in the contemporary world right now? Like, I feel like the hive mind stuff was usually a reaction to fears of like communism and
Yeah.
like collectivism. So, like, what are we afraid of today? And can we turn that into a monster?
Globalism.
Right. Okay. So
Well,
capitalism's one, right?
capitalism, a lot of people do find globalism to be scary. I find it to be inevitable.
Hmm.
Plagues are obviously a big one right now.
Hmm. Totally.
But actually, I think that there is something to be said. Like there is kind of actually global disaster, like some kind of a climate
Hmm.
shift is also a big one as well.
Oh, climate change. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Can we make this some kind of allegory, like a physical manifestation of climate change? Is that
That's what
something
I
that we can
mean.
possibly do? Yeah.
I think that's smart. And if it's climate change, it would be like on a galactic level. Like I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna mention Voyager, forgive me, but sometimes it has good ideas. But you remember in Voyager the Omega
Hi,
particle?
Voyager.
Do you remember the Omega particle that the Borg were after and basically it could permanently damage space travel? Like
Yes.
something apocalyptic like that would be cool if the aliens had that.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. Like it can kind of fuck with the astral strings, maybe. Like maybe
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Maybe they're an infection of the astral strings.
Okay. Okay. How are we
from
going to
the
do
from
that
the
though?
beginning of the universe. Because remember, the astral strings are cracks in the universe that formed during the Big Bang, potentially, or they might also be like rips in the universe, like
Right.
we said with the
Right.
with the fracture.
Going
So
back
maybe
to
they're
the
from the beginning of the universe. Sorry.
going back to the fear of plagues, what if we look at it as humanity is an infection and the universe is a body, and this is just antibodies and different an
Ooh,
autoimmune response of the universe?
I like that.
if we're now looking at space like it's one giant organism, and these things are essentially just trying to wipe out what they convey as a disease,
Yeah,
and
if you
they
want.
do that through. Actually, that kind of fits in because if you
Yeah.
want to see space as an organism, then these aeons of ether, essentially, they are rewarping the space, or the galaxy, or the actual physical plane of existence back to what it thinks it should be
Yeah.
after humanity has actually, can we make that a consequence of the ability to use the strands? Like maybe humanity's manipulation of those astral strands is what got the attention of these things in the first
Yeah. It
place.
awakened them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they probably view consciousness and life as a form of aberration. Like it's so rare because it's not supposed to happen. So their
Oh,
response is to eliminate it. And it's not like they're doing it maliciously. It's because that's what they're designed to do.
that's actually horrifying because now their ideal for the universe is a dead and empty and quiet universe,
Right.
which is like
A peaceful
chilling
place.
because it all ends in nihilism
I
in
love it.
our perspective anyway.
Beautiful.
Ooh, yeah, okay, that's cool. And so let's kind of
You're
give a
just
little bit
trying
of
to
a
be happy-go-lucky.
no, because now we get to punch those things in the
In the
fucking face.
face. Maybe, and
Yeah.
they're probably like ethereal in some sense. They must take on forms like by taking material from whatever setting they're in, you know?
I disagree with that. I just want to have them like be giant bone monsters, or like giant.
Bone monsters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if they're representative of entropy and death, then why not just have them be like giant skeleton monsters? But not
We,
not as simple and as dumb as that. But
Yeah.
like have them have cool designs that just incorporate a lot of carapace and
Mhm.
kind of chitin and stuff like that.
just a giant cone that eats things with energy, like in Star Trek.
Yeah. Like the crystalline entity.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're trying to shoot your 43rd photon torpedo, and I'm pretty sure you said you only had 42. I'm like 90%
They
sure.
learned how to manufacture some.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like, so if they're like some element of the astral strand, their astralness could inhabit these structures. So say you go to a world that's like it's a world that has a remnants of a previous civilization. Like they could like beam themselves into it, take a bunch of those corpses or I don't know, fragments of that civilization and form into these horrific monsters that are unique to that world. And you've got to not only break the monsters, but also like dissipate the astral force too in order to really destroy them.
I like that. All right, cool. One thing I just think that this imagery kind of popped out to me when I was thinking about this idea, but humanity's use of the astral strand is like them like flicking part of the spider web. It's like getting the spider's attention. That's essentially what we're doing, in the grand scheme of things.
I love
Going on the trend of trying to be happy, the one that I have is a little bit happy-go-lucky. I don't recall how big the Mondo Corporation was, but I see it as spanning through a bunch of different sectors and having like branch offices in almost any major planet. The idea that I had was an internal power structure that was caused also by relics. And the way that it has is, imagine district managers or regional managers of this area have a relic fighting ring. And that is how they battle out deals, how they come to conclusions, or how they fight for supremacy. Because if you have the best fighting robot, you technically have the best tactics, the best ideas, and the most monetary power behind you.
So Robot Jox.
Yeah, Robot Jox.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
There's nothing wrong with Robot Jox. Except, can I make a suggestion? Can instead of it being a one-on-one thing, can we have it be either tag teams or like small teams battle? Like maybe like a 2 or 3 or 4 person squad time, versus the other one?
Yeah, I could see that. Like once again, going back to the fact that it could be not just regional. Imagine if it was like north versus west, but sometimes it's also power struggles within that area itself. But
Oh,
when they all
absolutely.
come together, they're like, hey, we got to represent the East faction of Mondo Corp. So let's go take those West Side bastards.
Yeah.
And it's all within the Mondo Corp, is what you're saying, which I think is hilarious.
I'd like to believe
Yeah.
that the general populace doesn't even know that this is going
Yeah.
on, because they would see it as a gross misuse of both the relics and also the amount of power behind it. And since Mondo Corporation we set up as they have some of the best parts, this is also how they go about getting parts from the battles.
And testing, which is great.
Yeah, like it just like, my corporation has recently gotten this plasma lance. Let's see you beat that.
You could tell some really fun stories.
Yes, because now you have like a high school sports anime. Oh, wait a minute. That, but also, is this how the training is done for the Mondo Corporation? Like training how to use the relics is all done through like kind of this corporate, like squad battling?
Oh, yeah. I like to believe that it's not to the death unless it's a very important like match, or if it's an accident, which might also, if you want the political intrigue, maybe, oh no, we accidentally hit them right in the cockpit. How sad that your star player died.
Yes, and I think that we should use this as a conceit to like show that, or like convey that the Mondo Corporation has pound for pound the best mech pilots, or at least those who are associated with the Mondo Corporation are like, oh, those are Mondo Corp guys, those are the badasses, and it's because they have these like, like sports, marathon, or these sports competitions of mech piloting. Yeah.
He's fought over 400 battles, whereas other people have maybe fought 10 and been considered an ace.
Yeah,
it's a great intelligence gathering maneuver on the part of the synthetics who really control the Mondo Corporation too, because they're not only assessing the strength of their own corporation, but I bet they get challengers too, potentially outside, who now they can test against.
I'm assuming freelancers would also come in where they're like, hey, you want a position in my company? It's mech pilot. Wait, you guys have mech pilots? Yeah.
Officially, no, but unofficially,
sign this NDA first.
Yes.
The law requires me to say no.
Yes. So now you're going to sign this NDA, and now I'm going to show you the mech that you're going to pilot.
Oh man, yes, I love the idea of an NDA. It's like we disavow any knowledge you have of being a relic pilot whatsoever.
Yes. And
that's
you can
amazing.
go there, like, if you're dishonored, say you're dishonored from a faction, or you're like, an outcast of some sort from your group, you could join the Mondo Corporation and get back into action. There's consequences at a price, but at least you're back in action.
I also like the idea that at some point the space Luddites are going to find out about this underground arena and are just going to be like, what? Everything we said was true. Look at this.
This is ridiculous.
This is an abomination to our sun god.
And the Mondos are like, hey, you can join in the fight if you want.
Yeah, but that would be super unfair because the straight edge Luddites use swarm tactics, so it's not going to be nearly as effective. It's like it's a 4v4, and the fucking straight edge Luddites are in like.
Wait.
Yeah,
the Luddites that pilot the relics purposely make a front company so that they can enlist, and all they seem to do is have accidental deaths on the other side.
Oh my god, that's brilliant.
That's no.
Yep.
That's okay. That's like an anime villain. Exactly. That's an anime villain for sure.
They're fake OSHA. They like pretend to be like have OSHA accidents basically.
It's you've seen Hajime no Ippo, right?
Yes.
What's that guy who intentionally just like fucks people up in the ring, like just because he's like, I want to cause bloodshed, and like he's that guy. What's his name?
The guy with the flicker jabs?
I think so.
Yeah, he was like a Yakuza or something, and he was just like, I just want to hurt people. I don't want to win. That's why I'm going to keep on elbowing you in the damn fist.
Yeah, and like he was the one who was like eating raw meat or some shit like that too.
Yes.
Was that him? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page here. Oh man. So by the way, I would just like to point out just how we went hard right with like very serious topics in the beginning, and now we're like fucking sports anime punching fucking monsters in the face. I'm like, yeah, this is. I appreciate that our setting can have both, it has the capacity for both things, because I think that's really important.
I would like someone to play characters in the jock anime arena and then go to the serious war front and be like, I don't know what's going on, guys.
That's the same anime. That is the same. You watch the journey. The journey that Daniel was talking about starts out as sports anime jock, goes into complete disillusionment with the entire system. That is the plot that we've now created through our fucking plot hooks. Oh man. Well, I'm actually gonna go next because I have one that doesn't have anything to do with relics at all, kind of. I want to, picture it, shall we say. Let's picture that you are a bounty hunter, but a cooler title than bounty hunter. Because you're hunting relic pilots, and you catch them when they're outside of their relic. You catch them in the streets. You have to find out who they are. You have to make sure that they're relic pilots at all, and then it is your job to catch them and bring them to justice. And the way that you can do this sets you up as either the good guy or the bad guy with our setting, because realistically, you can be the good guy taking down the relic pilots who've lost all their humanity and now they're just kind of mindless death machines. Or you can be in kind of keeping in theme with the political aspect, you can just be headhunting for political opponents, or you can be headhunting for dissidents, so to speak. There are so many different directions that you can take with this. And I just love the idea of living in the giant cities, and it's a noir story. It is not a, rocket punching a fucking monster in the face, though I do love that. It's more like I have a fucking revolver. It's a space revolver, don't get me wrong, but it's a revolver, and I need to bust down this door of a drug den to find my relic pilot who's doing the drugs to keep him in the suit. That type of thing. I want that grit and I want the noir. That's what I want. It's basically Blade Runner, but that's kind of what I want.
It's basically like it's what the Mandalorian does for Star Wars now. It's instead of dealing with all the Jedi nonsense, it focuses on the not bad, the cool Western part of it, which I think is great. Like, instead of focusing on the giant mechs, we're focusing on the guy who has to do the dirty work, to get them out of commission.
Daniel, 1000%. Yes. Absolutely right.
Because I would watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, right? Like, how fucking cool would that? And, like, maybe it's like, I'm picturing in the background there are, relic fights happening. And maybe it's in the literal background as this guy is trying to take down his target.
Yep.
Yeah. He's like actually taking down a third target as two relics fight in the background in the city or something.
He's just
like
waiting till the guy finishes the battle. He's exhausted. He beat the other relic. He gets out of his relic. He goes to the bar, sits down at the bar, orders a drink, and then the bounty hunter sits down next to him and he says, I got to take you in.
Yeah. There's so many great scenarios that you can have with that. Like, oh man, that's so cool. I'm so fucking down. Like, I was already excited about this setting. I'm now double excited about this setting now. Oh my God. Also, we can all agree that The Mandalorian is the only good thing to come out of Disney Star Wars, right?
Yes, hands down.
Wait,
okay.
Does Clone Wars count? The TV show?
No, that came first. That came first.
Yeah. And that's not Disney though, right? Yeah.
Well, technically, Star Wars is now under the Disney umbrella, so everything Star Wars is now technically Disney.
Was Clone Wars Disney stuff too?
No, because it was
they do
originally
own it, but it was not theirs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it started out separately and then became Disney. Yeah. And then I think they actually commissioned another season.
They did. It's good.
I haven't seen it, but I assume it's good.
But yeah, absolutely, it's the only good thing Disney has made for Star Wars.
And it's so good. Oh my God, is it so good.
Brilliant. Good things.
If you haven't seen The Mandalorian, go get yourself a free Disney Plus 14-day trial and just binge it, because it's really worth your time. I imagine that it's kind of like it will increase subscriptions when the second season comes out, much like, like the Game of Thrones does to HBO subscriptions. Whenever there's a new season, it kind of spiked the subs for a little bit.
Yeah.
Until that last one, but can't really.
We do not talk.
Yeah.
Also, your bounty hunter is a prime employee for the Mondo Corporation and for the synthetics.
I imagine that there's a whole substrata, so to speak, of bounty hunters. It's not just one person. It's like you can really follow a bunch of them.
Like they would work for the Luddites, the Plowshares dudes. They'd work for the Inner Sphere. Everyone.
Oh,
I could see a bunch of them even being the Luddites because they take a passion in it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you get the reputation of being the one bounty hunter who doesn't take pilots in alive because it's against your religion. All sorts of stuff. All sorts of cool stuff.
I want to play that game. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, I was gonna bully you into running it, but I would run that game. I would definitely run that. That sounds so fucking cool, man.
Okay, so this one is near and dear to my heart because I love revenge. So, what I have in mind
is the weirdest segue I've ever fucking heard.
I love revenge, and every one of my enemies will get theirs. So my idea is
exactly, yeah. I mean, you captured it. So it ties in with the bounty hunter in a sense, except for the bounty hunter is driven by a sense of either monetary gain or he has duty, right? Like the Mandalorian is driven by duty more than he is money, although money is a factor. Whereas like Boba Fett, at least in the movies, just wants money, right? So my the character, the principal person to be following in this concept is driven by revenge. So I'm picturing, I want to focus on the individual character, on the gunslinger type. Perhaps this is a relic pilot from the Wolf faction. So this is the one who this faction used to be a military arm of one of the other factions, broke off, made its own independence. And these are the ones that are on a lot of drugs. Basically, that's their post-human ability. But anyway, like he's a lone wolf who used to belong to this faction. Something catastrophic happened to him that either he was wrongly accused, or she, lost someone close to them, or she was dishonored. And this person is in some way broken, right? And so is their mech. So the story would follow them having to go out into the fringe, find the reliquary, repair the mech. It would follow a kind of like Klingon / Worf story of regaining your honor and reamassing followers and people to be your troop again, even though people don't trust you anymore. You don't have anything to lose, and so you want to get revenge on your target. But the twist would be, once you get within reach of the thing you want, like the person you want to take down for doing this to you, you realize that the thing that you thought was lost to you, whether that's the person you thought you lost or the chance of redeeming yourself, is available. And you're like, crap. Now, do I make a choice of carrying out my revenge, or do I restore myself, figuratively? So I think that the revenge quest is always about balancing, the primal urge to destroy your enemy and also redeem yourself. So that's the choice that this character would have to make in the end.
Have you ever seen, Daniel, the Revenge trilogy?
No, what is this?
That it's a series of Korean films. It's like, so they are Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance. Mm-hmm. But I would also say I Saw the Devil is probably in there as well. It's basically it's Park Chan-wook. His entire, oeuvre is revenge movies, and man, it's a good ass fucking series of movies you should watch. You've at least seen Old Boy, right?
I haven't seen Old Boy, but I know it's like classic.
What?
I haven't. We got to watch it.
Daniel, I just turned to look at you in the chair that you're not in because we're recording remotely. I am so astounded that you have not seen Old Boy.
I have not. I've heard about it a lot, though.
If you love revenge, you would love Old Boy.
I mean, my knowledge of revenge comes from like mostly
personal experience.
Well, that, but also like old British lit, so like either Shakespeare or like Spanish revenge tragedies, which I just love. Mm-hmm. So they're mostly play form, but like I would love to see a lot more revenge movies. So I'm totally down for that.
I have a list for you, man. Well, okay, Old Boy is definitely the best of the trilogy, and then I Saw the Devil is also really good as well. Mm-hmm. I would recommend those two very, very highly. They're excellent, and it basically it touches a lot. The reason I bring it up is because it touches so deeply on the themes that you're exploring here. Except the thesis of those movies is essentially revenge is only destructive. There is no redemption in revenge, you know, and it is only corrupting and self-destructive.
Yeah, I mean, that's a choice I think that this character has to make in the end. Like, when they get the twist, when they realize that all is not actually lost, they have to choose between destroying themselves by carrying out the revenge or making a different choice, and maybe they can't have their revenge or the full revenge, but they can restore themselves.
Yeah, I'm confused by the. Are you saying you study Spanish revenge strategies? I'm getting.
Oh yeah, so Spanish revenge tragedies. It's a genre of I think restoration plays. If I may have the time period wrong, but basically like there's a book called The Spanish Revenge Tragedy, and it's great. Like it's just a bunch of plays that are all revenge tragedies.
Okay, I thought you were like sitting down and just like reading books about revenge and being like, that's a good idea.
I mean, that's basically what I'm doing.
See, this is what people don't understand about English majors is that, you know, you think that you're reading books about flowery language and, you know, like ponces and shit like that. What we're really actually reading is the dramatic and thematically appropriate way to drink the blood of our enemies.
Yeah, so I just looked up again to remind myself. So for those who are interested, it's called The Spanish Tragedy. It's called, or it's known as Geronimo is Mad Again, and it's fantastic.
Ironically, an English playwright.
There you go. Apparently, it's also like Elizabethan, so not Restoration.
Yeah, because Restoration is pre-Elizabethan, right?
I'm not sure. I just remember a long time ago I took like a Restoration drama class, and it was really boring. Sorry for my teacher who may hear this.
Wow.
Why would they? No, they're not going to hear this. Hey, Daniel's English teacher, go fuck yourself.
And that's the hate mail we receive.
Yeah.
He writes you like a 17-page like thesis about why you're horrible.
Listen here, you little shit.
That's how it starts. That's how it
starts. Look, we're creating our own revenge story right now, okay?
I've been playing a lot of Shipbreaker, which I'm not sure if anyone knows what that is, but it's where you disassemble ships, go through them, and salvage them, and I find it unusually fun.
It's not unusual for you at all. That's like so up your alley. You like banal, weird, niche games, so that's totally you. That's not weird for you at all. Although
I meant I find it fun, and I know it's weird.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much of this plot would apply to others, but there is also a book that I liked that was called Shipbreaker, and I find that a little bit ironic, but they're both about breaking apart ships and making a living off of that. One is set into the distant future, but my idea was following a salvage crew during essentially the first unification wars, which we were having that after humanity broke apart, that the inner sphere went out and started to, I don't want to say colonize, but reincorporate a bunch of the planets. And I figured that these would be massive battles, as there'd be plenty that were like fighting for their independence. And I wanted to have either a story or players be the salvage crew after these battles, picking up the machinery, the bits, going through destroyed ships, maybe finding survivors that were locked into one room, 20 decks down kind of thing. But also to add the element of danger, I wanted this to be where also some of the Cthulhu-like monsters of space come into mind, of where there's small little things, person-sized, that eat on the debris of the relics.
Ooh.
I love that idea, and I also love the idea that they could possibly be harbingers of the giant space monsters that we were kind of alluding to earlier. I think that, or at least making them kind of like the parasites on the backs of those things.
Yeah,
like
that sounds really cool.
What was it, Cloverfield? How it would drop those little like creatures off of the giant kaiju?
Yes, absolutely.
It was like fleas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love how it's taking another turn into like sci-fi horror, because I think that's great. Like exploring those lower decks to kind of get, and you find these people who are trapped down there, or you find like the whatever monsters are feeding on relics, which I want to underscore that kind of cool, feeding on them.
Yes. I also want to say that I'm getting some serious Dead Space vibes here as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to play that. Is it worth playing?
Yes.
Nice.
Just not the third one. Play the first two.
All right.
What are you?
The third
about?
one's hot garbage. Huh?
There's only 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. Well, I was gonna say one more thing about Chris's. Yeah, let's say one more thing about Chris's. I like that part of it being set kind of in the early, well, that this is a result of the early like wars for unification, because then you can have a lot of these salvage pilots be focused on the Trappist company, which were the ones that were the furthest out because they were the ones that first like started exploring from the inner sphere. So those might be the guys who their gear isn't the best because they've been out for a long time and they're on the fringe, and so they're dealing with these bizarre threats in the remnants of the salvage.
That's a great idea. There's a much more working class vibe to it as well. All right.
Do love that.
Yeah. Daniel, go ahead and wrap us up. Bring us home, Daniel. Bring us home.
The last one I had, so I had an idea for the jump missions with the horror, but I think you covered that in yours with wanting to bring in the kaiju. The other alternative I had, so we've done raids, we've done what's the opposite of a raid? Raids, and I'll re-say it. What's the other one? We did raids and was it infiltration? What's the other word for it? Raiding is going in.
Like, oh man, what are like? I know what you're talking about.
It was the
we've
one
done raids, sieges, heists.
Heists. Okay, I'll say it again. Okay, so we've done raids, we've done heists. This one's kind of in between the two, and it's called the jailbreak. So
that's basically a heist.
Basically a heist, right?
It's a heist, but instead of an object, it's a person.
Right. So I'm thinking of it going from the inside out. So if you have like a space prison, most likely this space prison is heavily fortified. It's also in a region of space that's difficult to get to. So maybe it's far away from, a quantum filament or an old style jump, whatever they're using to get to. And also if it's holding prisoners who are ex-pilots, most likely it's a military installation of some kind. So the reason why it would be inverse is that perhaps they can't get people in to help you break out, but they get information in. So they can get information to the prisoners and help coordinate the escape in the sense that they can give the prisoner or prisoners information that's necessary for them to like navigate the space they have to get through to get to the point where they can actually escape. But it's incumbent on the prisoner to get out himself. So perhaps in this setup, you'd have the target who needs to escape, a number of contacts who are also prisoners, or perhaps like prison guards who have turned to the side of the prisoner to help them get out, and they all have to work together. I imagine they'll make alliances in the prison of other prisoners who shouldn't be able to escape, but you need their help. So you end up building this crew that has kind of unstable alliances, just like you have in a heist, just like you have in like in a raid. But they've got to get together, and every move they make is critical on the way out. So the hope is perhaps that once they get out of the installation or far enough out, then they can meet up with the auxiliary support. Or perhaps since it's a military installation, there is a relic there, or there is, a powerful ship that they could take over and then use against their captors. So it's got all the tension of the raid or the heist, except for that the action begins at the crisis point, and breaks out from there.
I'm getting major like Escape from Alcatraz type vibes.
Yes, exactly.
Where it's like a jailbreak movie. That's what we're going for. Yeah, Jailbreak is a perfect summation of what we're trying to go with when we're talking about that.
The person who's trying to help you escape might also be like the Mono Corporation, and they don't tell you why they're helping you escape. They just need you out for whatever purpose. And once you're actually out, then they're like, okay, now here's what you owe us. That kind of thing too.
Oh yeah, there's always some kind of like poison attached to that shit. Absolutely.
Just a different prison.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Oh man. All right. What else can we do to add to so let's take that idea of the prison. Let's make it unique to the setting because a
Yeah.
jailbreak is a jailbreak is a jailbreak. What makes this unique to our Dawn of a Thousand Mechs setting?
Oh, I got it. Okay. Oh, part of it. Put the prison not in space, but put it on the other side of a quantum filament jump. So you can only get to the prison during certain windows when the filament turns. So maybe you can only get to it every like 3 weeks because that's when the window opens to it, and it's actually like 15 galaxies away.
Yes, absolutely. And then we can also have it be on like one of those frontier type worlds as well, which is why it's
Yeah.
so rare to get there. And yeah, that's
I want
really
to write
cool.
this as a short story now, man. You got it. We got to get so like it's like okay, I'm part of like I don't know the one of the factions, right? And we send like a few guys, and they're like, okay, we've got the information for the guy on the inside to get out. He's like a grizzled old pilot we need. He's gonna get out. You've got to meet him on the other side of the window once he gets out, and then you got to help him escape through the window before he's either A, destroyed by all the jailers there, and B, destroyed by the people on the other side of the window. So it's like this crazy ragtag mission to get in and out quickly.
And not only that, but you can also kind of work with, outdated information, like, oh, well, because we only see them so often, our information can be, literally decades old,
Right. Yeah.
If I could add something to this to make it even more unique, if you also did this as instead of say like a military where these people have done crimes or anything, what if this was more looked at by either the organization or the military, putting them out to pasture, as it were?
I was thinking that as well. So they're relic pilots. It's like Alcatraz, but all relic pilots for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be that they're beyond humanity. It's just like, oh, all those bounty hunters that we were talking about previously.
Yeah.
Guess where all those relic pilots went? They went to that place.
Forced retirement.
Forced retirement. Yeah.
It's kind of like so maybe it's not like a prison. Like when they're there, it's almost like this tedious, boring, like half virtually rendered retirement home where they all have their own. They all believe they're on some like they're one of them's living in Maine, one of them's living in I don't know like the beach, right? And it's all in this facility, but the facility is on a horrific like frontier world. That's why it's hard to get to.
And part of the mission is convincing your target that they're not actually in Maine, that it's time to go.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you've got to put yourself in the prison because you've got to actually spend some time with them in the virtualizations to convince them of its falseness.
Yes.
And I would argue that it's also harder because these are all people who have essentially lost a little bit of touch with their humanity. So how you're trying to get them to come back through a false world, and it's someone who has lost touch with the world even when they're in it.
That's so true. Oh my god. Their minds are fucked up from this. Yeah.
Oh my god. That's crazy.
Yeah, they kicked it up a notch.
Look, we all know that my favorite part about this podcast, besides the fawning adoration, is the collaborative aspect of it, and I think that we're not going to do better than that. I really don't. So with that being said, this has been another episode of Worldbuild with us. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to go ahead and send us your really cool idea for an episode, please do so by sending it to worldbuildwithus@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can send us a direct message or an open-faced tweet at Let's Worldbuild on the Twitters. We're not Instagram. We don't do TikTok. Well, Chris does, but
I do not do TikTok.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mixing that up with OnlyFans. My bad.
Those are hard.
I heard you can make a lot of money on that, though.
Oh, Chris does. Chris definitely does. You should see his twerking 101. Anyway, remember that we love you very much. We'll see you next week, and we're going to get through it together.